up. I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation here. As you know from the LinkedIn post that I've shared prior to this, I wanted to hold a virtual event for a few reasons. One, I've been coaching a lot of founders lately who are trying to go from 0 to 1, so the earliest stages of their startups. And in that, I've seen a lot of folks come to me and say, hey, I wish I would have known these things before I started closing my first deals, or what other sales traps are there that I should be aware of? So what I decided to do is create this LinkedIn Live event to share this more at scale. And for those who have RSVP'd who couldn't show up, I'll also send the recording. So let's dive into it. I'll first introduce myself. My name is Peter, as you all know. I'm a Korean American tech sales coach. I mostly focus on enabling founders, but I also do help early stage go-to-market teams. So think about the first 1, 2, 3 hires of your sales or go-to-market organization. I mentioned being Korean American. Obviously, it's not common to lead with your ethnic or cultural identity, but that's something I'm very proud of. I think it has a lot of implications in terms of how I show up in sales and within my coaching, the melding of both the Western and Eastern values and culture, I hold near and dear to my professional execution as well. I'm a former VP. Most recently, I was at a cybersecurity startup called Twingate, where we went from 0 to 5 million in a couple of years, grew the customer base from 0 to 600. So that was the earliest stage company I've been a part of, but I've also seen and found repeatability in enterprise sales across multiple stages of growth. So I was at Google, I was at Dropbox early on when we were trying to close our first Fortune 500 logo, and luckily was able to guide that through, and then was at companies like Slack and Front as well. So that's a little bit about me. As I mentioned and alluded to, this live event is for B2B tech startup founders. And if you're a founder who wants to get to their first milestone enterprise deal and doesn't know how to do it, hopefully you'll get some nuggets here from this event. You might have already had the experience of botching or not feeling confident about a pitch, or worse yet, not feeling comfortable about a negotiation. So if you felt that, this is for you. And then, mainly I work with a lot of technical and product founders who've never done sales before. So if you've never done sales before, even if you've been in operations or some sort of adjacent business function, it is very different to do enterprise sales. And so if you're looking for some frameworks and some advice around enterprise sales, this is for you. And specifically today, I'm going to narrow in on the top 3 mistakes startup founders make when they're first getting into enterprise sales. I think there's a lot more that I could cover, and that's why I'm going to have a Q&A section at the end of this, but I'm going to hone in on 3 that I find to be pretty common and that hopefully can help you tangibly even after this event. I'll provide you some tactical solutions. I also like to say I do a lot of mentality coaching. It's not just about sales. It's about getting into the right mindset to be able to close these large enterprise deals. So I'll cover that. And then lastly, I do want to give a plug for my 10-week sales sprint program. It's a boot camp that goes from start to finish of what a great enterprise sales process looks like. And so I'll let you all know, what that entails and share some stories from clients of mine who have gone through the first couple cohorts. So let's dive right into mistake number 1. I think the first thing I see a lot of is from founders, they are treating outbound lead gen and demand gen as if they're already known brand. So what this means is, they're maybe single threaded on email. They're also, when sending the email, very focused on their product versus, the pains that they're solving for. And so my main suggestion when I first start working with founders and talking about top of funnel is to really start investing in your personal brand sooner rather than later. I believe that prospects buy from thought leaders. They buy from your vision, not just your product. And so you need to lay the groundwork for your opinions before you say, hey, look at my product, which goes into the third bullet point around pain. Sell the pain point that you're solving for. I think this does a couple of things. One, it makes it very clear what your solution can help them with. But secondly, it also provides a stage for and foundation for you to be a thought leader within the industry, a domain expert, which I think is really important when selling to an enterprise organization. The last thing is think about providing value before asking for the meeting. A lot of first emails I see are asking to book a meeting, book a time, or learn more about their product or get feedback about their product. I think that's a wrong approach, especially in this day and age where founders are being bombarded with emails. So my suggestion for founders is to provide something of value. It could be an insights report, it can be a networking dinner, it can be, your thoughts on a specific pain point within the industry that you're seeing, trends. All these things are value before actually saying, okay, now can I meet with you? So to give some tangible examples on, a couple startup founders, these are both clients of mine that I think do this well. I'm going to show you a couple screenshots on some of their posts. So Victor Hunt is the founder and CEO of a company called Ava. They have a rewards platform for frontline workers that helps improve retention. If you think about the maid at a hotel, janitor, any frontline worker, a home care caregiver, these folks have really high turnover rate. And so they found a wedge into that industry where they provide a really end user intuitive platform where retention is improved. Their long-term vision is to also start helping with the back office automation of a lot of these home care providers that have frontline workers. But this is an example where Victor went to a conference, took a couple pictures, and asked this very intriguing question, like, what's the true cost of inefficiency in home care? And so, immediately really on the button talking about a pain point that he knows a lot of his prospects are probably grappling with. Now, this got 27 likes. He has other posts that get a lot more, but the importance of this is not just a single post, but he's actually having a steady drip of content where he's establishing himself as a thought leader within the space where he's trying to make waves. So take a look at Victor Hunt's LinkedIn profile. I think he has a lot of great content there. The second CEO I want to highlight is Ashu Dubey. He's the CEO of an AI support company called Glean. They help e-commerce brands with support and sales through automating a lot of the chatbot workflows of the past. And they do it in a way where it's a lot more human and it's a lot more accurate. So this isn't specifically necessarily about his platform, but he's weighing in as a thought leader on AI because it's such a core part of his platform. So he's talking about GPT-4o a few weeks ago and why it's not ready for companies like his. So I think, this is just another flavor of thought leadership, but it's really helping him establish an orbit and a network of folks who are leaning in to learn from him beyond, what his platform can provide. So now let's move on to mistake number 2. I think the second mistake I see a lot of startup founders make is they're spending way too much time on poor fit leads. So leads that aren't ultimately going to convert. And as a startup, you're very resource constrained. So this is a mistake you can't afford to dive into because it often also includes multiple team members. Sales is cross-functional. So you end up actually wasting a lot more of people's time than just yourself. And so, the way I think about this mistake and justifying why you shouldn't spend time with poor fit leads is because the prospect needs to sell you on their problem as much as you need to sell them on your product, right? Because if they don't have a problem you can hit out of the park, again, you're going to have conversation after conversation, but not a clear next step in terms of how you get to unlocking the budget or making moves on a formal evaluation. And so, like I said, in the intro here, there's a big risk of diving into a resource black hole where you're enlisting multiple people on your team and the ball's not moving forward in terms of the deal. So what should you do instead? My thoughts are, first of all, make sure you have a super clear pitch where your differentiators stand out. The other thing is you need to be asking a lot more questions during the first call because it's not just, again, about selling your product, it's aligning on the problem. And that doesn't become clear over just asking simple question like, what is your problem? I have this concept called breadcrumbs that I like to coach founders and sellers on. And what that means is you really need to truly listen to what your prospect is saying. A lot of times as sellers, we get single threaded on our talk track, but you need to be able to react to what your prospect is saying. So an example of that is if the prospect says, budgets are limited, but I'm still interested, instead of just moving on from that conversation, you should pick up that breadcrumb and say, what does it mean budgets are limited? And what does it mean that you're still interested? Because in my mind, either there's budget or there's not. So can you unpack that a little bit more? That's an example of following the breadcrumb. The other thing is, don't be afraid to address gaps. Not any startup, I would say. There's no startup that can address everything. There's no startup that can solve 8 to 10 problems right out of the gate. And so you need to be very comfortable saying, we don't do these 7 things, but the one thing we do well, it does seem like is an acute pain point that you're willing to invest in. And if the answer to that is no, we're not willing to invest in that one pain point, then again, you should avoid the resource black hole and move on. So to illustrate this second mistake, I'll just take the pitch as an example. I think in a poor pitch, you're really selling, you're talking a lot. In an effective pitch, you're aligning, and there's a lot of dynamic collaboration happening. So if you take a look at founder talk time as well as prospect talk time, in a poor pitch, it might look something like this, where you're talking a ton the majority of the time during the intro and discovery. Even during the deck, it's you talking and pitching, and maybe the prospect will ask a few questions, and then you run out of time at the end, but you're talking for the most part during the close. Now, in a clear pitch, I think that's markedly different, materially different. You spend time in the intro and discovery, but it's very dynamic. You're going back and forth quite a bit because you're testing the waters on how closely you fit with their pain points. Even during a deck and demo, again, it's a conversation. And there's a way you could design the slides where it feels natural to ask even more questions during the deck and demo portion. And then I think in a clear pitch, you always leave ample time for next steps and close. So in a 30-minute call, you might even spend 10 minutes just on next steps and the close process, because every enterprise organization is different in terms of how they handle an evaluation. And so to get to that second call, you need to be able to suss out how to get there, and then what's even beyond the second call in terms of the rest of the process. So hopefully this helps. And Carolina, I see your question. We could definitely address that at the end if you don't mind. I'll just go through the slides real quickly first. Okay, so we've gone through 2 mistakes. The third mistake I wanted to highlight for first-time founders is I see a lot of this where you're negotiating against yourself. So what does that mean? A lot of founders feel like their product is too early, so they're offering low price points or free design partnerships. But the thing about that's dangerous is you'll be spending the most amount of time with your early customers, and they're actually getting a front row seat to your founding philosophy and your vision. So their investment needs to reflect that. And in a lot of cases, they're getting a premium experience. So, free design partnership doesn't match up to that, in my opinion. So what should you do instead? I think, a few things to help with the confidence aspect of positioning your price. Really think about the value of your product, not just the cost. And practice repeatedly this is why our price is the price pitch. So you have to have, at least 2 or 3 compelling reasons to say, hey, our price is $200,000 because, maybe it's because we're saving you for full-time engineering headcount. It's because we're going to drive X percentage of revenue increase. Like, really get that part of the pitch down. And then the last thing is, don't give into discounts early. A lot of enterprise procurement folks are professional negotiators. So they're going to want to get a better price point or a lower price point. And so as sellers and founders, the trap is that we actually offer those discounts as a reaction to that reaction, but it's the wrong thing to do. And I'll give you some thoughts on and phrases on how you can avoid that. So to make this a little bit more tangible, let's go through some phrases that I've heard and how you can actually avoid these mistake trap phrases. So the first thing is, I've heard this a ton of times where founders on calls are telling prospects we're selecting free design partnership engagements because we're still actively building the product. It might sound attractive, actually, because you're getting feedback, and feedback, of course, is valuable to you as an early stage startup. But I think what's missing is that you're investing a lot of your time and they're getting, again, that premium experience, and your product probably already solves a few pain points, even if you think it's an MVP version, right? There's still probably value being disseminated there. So instead of saying free or design partnership, what I would say is we're selecting 5 early customers, so you can be transparent about the fact that you're early, and say, these 5 customers would receive direct access to the founding team, me, my CTO, and my CPO, and white glove onboarding. And we're doing this at a special rate of X. And that special rate should be commiserate to, what they might pay in the future, or what they might pay even for like a platform that's analogous to your platform, but potentially at a slight discount, right? So the point here is to set that not at anything like below 10K, I would say is not worth your time as an enterprise seller. But between 10, 100K, figure out kind of how you want to graduate those deal sizes, but make it so that the enterprise organization is pot committed. And in my experience, anything in kind of the low 5 figures don't get the investment level from like an onboarding and execution perspective from the enterprise side, right? Even if it sounds attractive as a low price point. So hopefully that makes sense. The other phrase I would avoid is, I've seen this a lot too, where the procurement officer gets sticker shock, and the founder's like, okay, yeah, you're right. If it's too much for you, I can send you another proposal for a discount baked in. There's a few things incorrect with this, but let me go over what I would say. What I would say is, again, sell why the price is the price. We believe the price reflects the value of the platform, especially with some of the outcomes you're looking for. And you can list those out. And if you've already done a POC or a light POC, even better. You can actually go to the success criteria there and say, these are the values that your team is actually tested for. And then I always leave the door open, right? Sending another discount or another proposal without having direction is really tough, right? You're kind of putting your finger in the air and guessing. So I would always ask, that being said, how are you thinking about the investment, and what level of commitment were you expecting, right, to open up that discussion? So that's on the discount side of things. There's one other part of this phrase, which is, if somebody is like, okay, well, X amount is what I expected. You're trying to charge 70K, I want 50K. Instead of saying, okay, great, we can do 50K, what I would say is, okay, let me think about that. That's a pretty steep discount. And again, it doesn't feel like it truly aligns to the value you'd be getting here. Paying 50K to drive extra, 3, 4, 5 million in revenue. There seems to be a little bit of a gap there. But let me take that back. If we can hypothetically get to that rate, how quickly can we move, and what's the rest of the process? So as you can see, it's very collaborative. And as a founder, you need to be able to be very cerebral around some of the black holes, or around some of the unknowns that usually, if you're a first-time seller, you'll just move on from. But an extremely skilled seller will be like, hold on a second, let me actually dive into what exactly you mean by this is too expensive. So try that out the next time you feel like you're getting bombarded with discount requests. The last one is, I've seen this a lot too, where you give the pitch, you give the demo, they're somewhat interested, but there's a couple things where they say, hey, we can't move forward without X, Y, and Z. Now, in some cases, those are legitimate, but in other cases, they're not. So a lot of times what I'll see founders say is, okay, sure, like let's actually start working together, because they're so excited about the brand or logo. And they'll say, you can start paying us once the feature is launched. That's a nightmare from a lot of different perspectives. It's hard to recognize revenue off of that. It's hard to also put in contract a delivery date when your roadmap is changing so often, right? So instead of agreeing to payment after a certain feature is launched, you should push back. You should say, hey, if that feature is a requirement from day one, we could reconnect once we've developed that functionality. But that being said, it feels like the other components of the platform are exciting and will still be helpful to leverage right away. Is that right? So you could tell from these phrases, I ask a lot of questions. It's very back and forth. Oftentimes, what you'll hear folks say is, yes, actually, I still could get value out of this initial version of the platform. You're right. And then you could say, okay, if that's the case, why don't we start implementing the technology as it is today? And then you'd have direct input on the direction and design of that roadmap feature you also want. So you could see here how nuanced this answer can be. But again, like if you're doing enterprise sales for the first time, you might think about reacting, but really go slow to go fast. Really be intentional about your response, push back, and see how you can get commitment from folks, even though your product doesn't do, the 3 or 4 things they wanted to do long term. And that's another key point too. A lot of enterprise organizations, they think in terms of years, not months. And because a lot of startup founders are moving super quickly, they get conditioned to think, okay, like I actually can't sell this until I have XYZ feature and I can go back to the team and have those shipped. That's kind of the wrong mentality. So hopefully this helps in terms of tactical phrasing. Happy to answer more questions after the presentation about this, but let me just summarize the mistakes and solutions. So the first is treating outbound as if you're already a brand. That's really difficult because a lot of startups are unknown. So my suggestion is build a strong personal brand, really start putting your opinions out there and provide value beyond your product to get that first meeting and that first interaction. The second mistake is spending way too much time with leads that aren't going to close. So the answer here is craft a clear pitch deck, craft a clear kind of intro demo that allows you to weed out people who are not going to benefit from your solution. Because again, with early stage sales, you just need to close the first 5, 10, 15 deals. You don't need to sell the world. And then the last advice I have is get out of your own head. Don't make assumptions when negotiating, and don't negotiate against yourself. The product and what you're doing, a lot of you are super brilliant technical minds, so you deserve to get paid even from the get-go. Awesome. So that's the summary. I'll move on now to talk about the sales sprint program that I mentioned as well, because I help founders think through these aspects every day, all day, every minute, every hour of my waking time. So you've likely joined, I think, because of a few reasons. Some of you are in the venture space, some of you are founders, some of you are salespeople as well. But I think if you're a founder, you really want a simple solution to your sales challenges. But there's also, and seemingly it should be simple because there's a lot of literature out there. But unfortunately, some of it's snake oil, some of it's not tactically applicable to your business or your stage. So that might be why you joined. Or maybe you've actually tried to follow some playbooks and the results aren't there. Or lastly, you've made some mistakes and you can feel it and you're not confident, but you want some support. So today, you have two options. You could continue to be self-taught. I'll probably do more of these too if you all think this is useful. But you can also dive into a program, which is what I'll get into. And if you dive into a program like Sales Sprint, there's some material benefits, right? So Ashu, I mentioned earlier, in terms of being a great thought leader and really building his personal brand, after starting working with the Sales Sprint program, he's doubled his revenue in just 4 months, right? And we have 6 months left in the year. So time is of the essence. And I really want to quickly help you all get to your first $1 million, $2 million in revenue, and do it in a way that's authentic to your own voice. And so I've developed the program to help founders be confident. I often say, I think I even said on this live broadcast, like I'm selling confidence and the ability for people to be authentically themselves, and to really lean into their values, right? So what you'll get is 10 weekly group training sessions that include sessions like founder-led outbound, perfecting your pitch, practicing it, and negotiation. Negotiation in a way where it feels like you've done it, right, for several years. The other thing too is, I believe that there's like sales doctor, sales therapist moments that CEOs need, where they need to kind of phone somebody on demand. And so I'm available for that in terms of like dynamic spurts, but I also do biweekly one-on-one sessions where we dive into pipeline and figure out the deal strategy for each deal that you're working. And then the last thing is I have a founder-led sales community called Zero to Hero, where I post a lot of async forum topics. I'll post a lot of video reactions of third-party content. And so you'll have access to that community as well. And so that's also a value that you get. In terms of like what actually happens, right, in the program, obviously I showed you Ashu's quote, and there's no replacement for somebody actually going through the program. But I think if I'm going to condense it down into a couple bullet points, the first is, a clear understanding of how to actually do sales utilizing your own voice. That's the most important thing. I think Career salespeople sell a certain way. They've been trained across several years. Founders and product leaders who are now CEOs have their own superpowers, and it's not, being in sales for 10 years. It's being much more understanding of the product or being much more genuine and authentic. So you'll get a clear understanding of that through various examples. And then, like I said, at the end of the day, it's all about closing deals that have material sizes. And I've closed, deals as small as, $10,000 a year, and then as large as $1 million or $2 million a year. So these are, I think, things that the breadth of what I've seen, I want to help you see that as well, and help you actually negotiate a premium for all the valuable things that you're developing. This is a look at the first two cohorts. The first two cohorts, I had 5 CEOs each, so 10 total. They've all been amazing. I think, you all can take a screenshot of this, look them up. I think what's interesting here is they all span multiple industries, right? Ava is selling into kind of home care providers. Glean is selling into marketers. Somebody like Bezzy, Julian at Bezzy, they sell to 3D designers because Figma doesn't work for 3D. And then Player Zero and Radian, they sell into the engineering stakeholder as well. And as we all know, technical buyers are very skeptical. So, the concepts I think that I teach are relevant for B2B enterprise across multiple industries. This is, a shameless plug on what others have said about me. Like I said, I'm really big on delivering confident mentalities. And a lot of these founders have learned a lot in enterprise sales. And so hopefully it shows in kind of what they're saying about the program. And I really get hands-on with founders and really tactical. So it's really fun for me to, look at an email draft or listen to a call and give feedback right away on things that you could tangibly use pretty quickly. So there's that. Now, pricing is interesting. It's interesting doing this on a live, but I wanted to also be transparent about the pricing. So the sales sprint program is 10 weeks. It's $20,000. For anybody listening to this recording or live right now, I am offering a discounted rate. I'm also offering lifetime access to that founder-led sales community I talked about. And then I'll also add an extra one-on-one coaching session. And so message me. I'd love to work with as many of you as possible. And I think this will be a transformational program for a lot of you who are trying to get to that first milestone. So with that, I'll stop, and I can see the comment thread, so I'd be happy to answer any questions. Carolina, if you're still here, I'll read your question and answer it right now. So Carolina's question is, what about when the problem is not easy to quantify and is not seen as priority by many organizations? For example, when it comes to employee well-being. Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I think that unfortunately, I hope this isn't a cop-out answer, but I think you have to find a way to easily quantify it because a lot of people are going to pay for things that have material impact on whether it's like revenue generation or cost cutting. I think that something like employee well-being, and I care a ton about it. I talk a lot about mental health and burnout syndrome with tech workers, but something as fluffy as that actually has tangible outcomes for businesses. So I think it's a lot about honing your narrative to say, hey, this is just good for human beings in general. But by the way, did you know it has XYZ impact on your bottom line or your top line? I think getting that really clear is helpful. And allows you to actually straddle multiple roles, right? Like the head of people or somebody who's in charge of the well-being department might not need that, but a CFO or CEO might, especially considering how tight budgets are these days. So that would be my suggestion there. Any other questions? Thanks for that, Carolina. I hope that helps, and we can definitely follow up as well. If no other questions, we can also wrap up. Hopefully, folks, I can't see how many people are on the live event, but hopefully folks were able to join after the technical snafu. And if not, I'll definitely do my best to send this out to you all who RSVP to the other LinkedIn live event, but really appreciate you all tuning in for those who are able to join. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your week and weekend.